What's up, everybody? CHM Carnivorous here. I hope that you are having a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Now, this video is a video all about when you get your plant. Specifically, what happens if you receive your plant and it's damaged. So, in this video, we're going to be covering several different topics about the different types of damages you could potentially receive, what to do if you do get those damages, how to treat your plant afterwards, and then most importantly, what preventative measures you can take to help prevent or help to mitigate your risk of those damages. This is a very important video. I don't see a lot of these videos out there. As a matter of fact, I don't know that I've ever seen one out there. I could be wrong, but hopefully this is informative, and I hope that you get something out of this. I'll see you soon. What's up, everybody? CHM Carnivorous here, and as I talked about in the introduction, today is all going to be about damaged plants that you receive. Now, if you collect Nepenthes long enough, it's an inevitable thing that will occur. You will get a plant that has some sort of damage, whether that's pest damage, whether that's weather-related or temperature-related damage, whether that it gets lost in the mail for too long and it sits there in those dark boxes, or if the box itself gets damaged. Now, what spurred this, spurred my idea for creating this video is I received a recent packing where the box was damaged. Now, thankfully, the plants were perfectly fine, but it kind of spurred my interest as if there's anything out there to try to show people what to do if that happens to them. And I have not been able to find anything like that, so I thought it was a missing area, a gap in sort of this whole process. And I thought that I would go over it with you, and I will specifically put in a tip near the end of this video that is very, very beneficial that you very rarely, I've only heard one other YouTuber talk about doing this, and this will prevent a big, widespread, long-term problem in your grow area. So first and foremost, how do you protect yourself from receiving these damaged plants? And the easiest answer to that is make sure that you're buying from reputable sources. Now, if you buy from a larger area, like let's say a Carnivorous or predatory plants, you can be assured that they have a return policy, not a return policy, a refund policy. Make sure that you read over that carefully. Most of these sites will not accept returns, and that's to prevent any pests that the buyer might have from sending it back to the seller. Now, make sure you read over their policy very closely and you understand that, and make sure that you have all those I's dotted and those T's crossed. If you're dealing with a less reputable company, maybe just an individual seller on eBay, it does not hurt to ask them what their refund policy is prior to purchasing these plants. Now, most reputable sellers, if not all of them, will do right by you and replace any plants that are damaged. However, it is always important to check on those things first to make sure. Point number two is if you're buying a cutting, understand that the larger the plant, the greater the risk there is that there's going to be damage, right? The smaller, more compact plants are easier to package, and so they will be fine for the most part. The larger cuttings, those are the ones that could potentially run into a risk. So like I've talked about in other videos, a really good pointer is to ask the seller if they have a cutting that has multiple growth nodes on it, and that will give you a plan B if that plant breaks. And if they refund you or send you another plant, you could potentially end up having two viable plants. So that is always a good thing. In a shorthand version of this, do your homework. Understand who you're buying from, what they have to offer, and then understand what their whole process of shipping looks like. Now, let's talk about the different types of damages that you can get. Now, the first and foremost would be temperature. Depending on when you buy this time of year, a lot of sellers will offer an option to have a heat pack put in with your plant. I highly recommend that you take this option up if you live in a climate that's cold. And here's a really important point: if the seller lives in a climate that's cold, or if there's any cold between you and the seller. So a lot of times we tend to look at our own weather, or we might even go a step farther and look at the seller's weather, but we don't take into account the weather at the states where that package will be traveling. And so that is going to spend the majority of its lifetime in that travel in between you and the seller. So it's important to understand what systems or what the temperatures are looking like around you, not just in your direct vicinity or in the vicinity of the seller. If it's a regular non-cold time of the year, obviously you won't need that and you should be just fine. Now, the second type of damage that we want to talk about is pests. So one of the really good, here's a very key pointer for you, is if there is, whenever you get a new plant, make sure that you quarantine that plant. Now, I will tell you that this is more about practice, or do the right thing. I know I have a tendency to get really giddy and want to put that into the collection, and it has bitten me in the butt before, and I have gotten, even from a reputable place, thrip that I introduced to my tent from one of their plants. So it's always a good idea to quarantine your plant and have a quarantine area so that you can monitor that plant for a week or so and to make sure that that plant is fine. Now, there are many ways you can do that. You could bag acclimate them. That will cause a quarantine situation. But what I recommend, you go ahead and removing that plant altogether away from your other plants so that they don't risk exposure. Now, there's a couple of different things to look for when you are seeing sort of damage. Now, thrip is going to have the lines that are going through the leaves like we've talked about, and you'll see very irregular shapes in the leaves. Mites is something that's a little bit more scary, and you need to watch out for that. And that will look like all the growth tips where the pictures are coming out of will be hard curled over. So all of them will look like hooks curling over. Those are something that you definitely do not want to introduce to your collection. Specifically, I recommend doing the quarantine process if you are buying from somebody who is not a large-scale grower, like somebody off of eBay or something of that nature, or if you're doing a trade. This is not knocking on the little guy here. It's simply that these large-scale producers have a lot of associates, people that are looking for these things, people that are watching these things, and they will have better opportunity to catch and treat these things on a large scale, as opposed to like a grower just like myself or somebody else that's more on the smaller side. Now, the other thing that you want to think about is if your package gets stuck in transit. Now, this can happen, and these plants will live and do quite fine in an enclosed box for a long period of time, especially if you're ordering overseas. They can spend up to a week or two in there. Once you get that plant, though, if it has been stuck in transit, you want to immediately remove it from all its packaging. Make sure that you check the media, make sure that the media doesn't seem compromised, i.e. breaking down, creating mold, and you want to make sure that the plant looks healthy. If the leaves are if they're very droopy and very limp, you want to give that supplier a call and let them know that that plant is under stress, and then you immediately want to get that plant into your environment. And in that specific case, I highly recommend that you bag acclimate your plant, because that is going to provide more of a stable environment to get that plant back to where it needs to be. If it's a healthy plant, they can withstand taking it right out and putting it into your environment if you don't want to bag acclimate. However, if it's been a long period of time with no light, I don't recommend you do that. And then one other point is, make sure that if it has not had light for a while, that you don't put it directly in front of your light. You give it a little time to acclimate, still have it under your grow light, but not keep it a nice distance, and then you can slowly bring it to where it needs to go. You don't want to cause any additional shock to your plant. Now, it is quite common, and it isn't considered a damaged plant if you have your plant that has some broken leaves and most likely some broken pitchers. That is just the name of the game. These are very fragile plants that we're dealing with, and that will happen. So you can, of course, always reach out to the supplier. Just understand that the chances are that they're not going to provide any sort of compensation for that, because that is just the nature of the beast. The pitchers themselves most likely will die as soon as you get it, and there is a really good chance that the plant will break. Now, what I like to do is start small. Buy something small from a supplier and see how they package it. See how they've taken the time to care for it. Todd's Tropicals does this extremely well. His plants are very, very well packed, and as a matter of fact, I received this plant, the last two plants I received was in a really very damaged box, and these plants were still perfectly fine. And I'm probably going to use the box as a thumbnail so you can see this box was all but a ball. I don't know what the post office was doing, but even with that amount of damage, the plants themselves were perfectly fine, other than a little bit of here and there, a little little damage to the leaves. The growth point was fine and healthy, and the reason for that was the way that Todd packages his plants. And so that's very important. You want to start small, see how they're being packaged. You can even ask the supplier ahead of time and then go ahead and place your larger orders once you know that they're taking the time to do that. Predatory Plants does a really cool thing where they actually pack the plant, and instead of using packing peanuts, they use sphagnum moss, and so they pack that sphagnum moss in it. Not only is that a great alternative and it's biodegradable, that's a great alternative. You get to use that, and sphagnum moss is not cheap, especially the stuff they're using, which is New Zealand sphagnum moss, but it also provides a nice cushion for those plants. Now let's see if you receive a plant that the media is dry. I highly recommend that you always check the media once you receive the plant. Even if it didn't get lost in transit, you want to make sure that that media is soaked. It's a rule of thumb when you get that plant to go ahead and put it into your new pot and then go ahead and give it a good soaking. Now some come more wet than others. If your plant is already saturated, you want to go ahead and skip that process and just spray it down like you normally would and treat it all the same. But sometimes you will receive it where the media is drier, and so you need to take care of that. Last tip, make sure that you take pictures. These suppliers will always want to see pictures, right? And that understandably makes sense. They don't want somebody saying that the plant is damaged and then not have any proof, and then they lose their margins. So very, very important that as soon as you unbox it, you take photos, and I even highly recommend that you take photos and or video of the actual unboxing of the plant, because there might be a potential issue with the box itself, and you want to have as much in your corner as possible. Now, I have not seen, or in my experience, I have not seen a grower or a seller give any pushback to the very extreme, but it's always good to arm yourself with this information, and it's always good to have that stuff ready to go. So, to cover it shortly, make sure that if this is all about being a doctor, and when you get your plant, this is sort of like the emergency room or whatever you want to call it, urgent care. You're getting this plant in, you've noticed there's some damages, you immediately want to assess what the damage is and then treat the plant accordingly. Again, make sure that the media is wet. Make sure that there are no pests that you can visually see. If you are hesitant in anything, it is always good to quarantine your plant for a week or so to make sure you check it so you're not introducing any colonies to your plants. Make sure that you check the damages on the box, take lots of pictures, and always do your research beforehand. And then if your plant is droopy, bring it into the light slowly, give it some water, and bag acclimate. I hope you've enjoyed this video. This is a shorter one, but I hope that it brought some insight to you. As always, have a wonderful day and a wonderful week, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.